And I didn't realize as a Torontonian that Northern California in the winter, San Francisco is pretty much as cold as it is in Toronto. I forgot, I should have brought my gloves and my hat or my toque. But anyhow, hey, Roy. Okay, so what I want to do, why don't we get started? I'll go to our Notion here page. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Morrissey. I'm your host. And welcome to Book Flow to everyone. We're on episode 156 of Book Flow. So if you can imagine, we started back in 2019, pretty much every single week, continuously we meet and kind of develop thought leadership at the intersection of science, technology, and consciousness. And we've covered a lot of authors and a lot of incredible books.
All these guys on.
Now, if you could do that for me, like someone mute someone there. And I'm just going to give you a sense of where we're going tonight. We've had Charlene Lee, author, New York Times bestselling author Charlene with us for the last week, and she's here this week. And the theme for last week was based on her 2019 book, The Disruption Mindset, Why Some Organizations Transform While Others Fail. And we took a deep dive into a whole host of topics you can see here on the left side as organizations move through that shift from, in this case, I would say update to 2022, an organization to an AI-powered organization. And perhaps the update to this 2019 book is continuous disruption mindset is probably the new reframe. As all of us already know, AI changes almost every week. The second episode, she did a great presentation, and we had a 2-hour deep dive into her book and her work at the future of work in general. And then this week, we're bringing with Charlene, one of her longtime friends and colleagues in the future of workspace, author Gary Bolles, who happens to be the co-founder of Next Collabs with me and the team here. And we're going to look kind of comprehensively at the future of work, AI, and continuous disruptive transformation. Let me take you to, this is the poster with the two of them and their book, kind of intersecting their ideas. They've done this throughout their career. Gary's title for his book is The Next Rules of Work, the Mindset, Skill Set, and Tool Set, plus AI is really the update to lead your organization through uncertainty. Both these books were put together in 2019, and obviously each of them are going through that sort of shift in their perception of what just happened, especially in the last year. At the Next Collective, we have Wednesdays as our thought leadership component of our community. On Mondays, we have Monday AI, and we meet for 2 hours every single Monday for the last 50 plus weeks since late November 2022, the AI moment, I call it. And we train up on AI tool sets and so on. If you're interested in joining us, at the very end, I'll put a link in and you can find out more about us. We really are working with theory on Wednesdays to develop thought leadership and have our finger on the pulse of really the emergent era. And on the Mondays, we take deep dives and really integrate and practice the tool sets that are reshaping everything. I did this little poster here to commemorate tonight's event in about an hour in a kind of workflow that we now use as our default workflow at the Next Collective, which is, and I think the most democratizing workflow of all, which is ChatGPT 4 to DALL-E 3 to Canva. I think that one is like going to become the ubiquitous content creators go-to kind of pipeline. Now, it may get updated in a couple of weeks when Midjourney has a desktop version of their AI image generator. But at the moment, the end of 2022, I think that's the go-to pipeline, very frictionless. So I, asked it to make a poster, a very, very big poster in a very minimalist kind of event space with people gathering to get ready for tonight's event. And I gave it the agenda that I'm going to show you shortly. And very quickly, as you know, with DALL-E 3, it actually does text pretty good. I would say almost like 98% kind of efficacy. And the cool thing is you can take the image, drop it into Canva, and they have AI tool sets in there as well. They have grab text. it takes all the text, it makes it live, and it associates it with a very close approximation of a font, and you can do any kind of final revisions to the text, and here's what you get. I think it's just an incredibly powerful set of tools that really enables all of us to be image makers, content creators. And I think this is not simply going to be the domain of the digital economy. I think this is going to start to move into organizations, and everyone in your workforce is going to be able to use these tools to amplify themselves and the team. Just to give you a sense of tonight's session, we have Gary and Charlene in the house with us for 2 hours. And they're both going to give a kind of opening introduction, like 5 or so minutes of their individual books and their current thinking on, the past year. And then we're going to start with just reflecting on 2023. And I'm giving credit where I think credit is due, the year of OpenAI. This all started in like November 30th, 2022. And it's been a heck of a year. Probably in my career as a designer, as an architect, and someone who's been very deep into tech, this year has probably been the greatest year of my career. There's just been so much innovation, so much creativity, practically happening every week. It's just been wonderful. And so both of the authors are going to reflect on the future of work relative to what just happened. And, in a sense, the update to their books, and review the significant developments and milestones in AI for the year 2023. Then there's a chance that what we'll do is we'll have a couple of questions as we kind of amplify that particular conversation. And then we'll move to the next section. Workforce and employment, very top of mind with most organizations and the C-suite. Balancing automation and augmentation. Examining the dynamics between increasingly automated systems and the enhancement of human roles by augmenting your workforce with AI tool sets, etc. Then we'll move as an architect. Something I'm very, very interested in tuned to is what I call the Phygital workplace, like Phygital meets digital. And Kevin Kelly talked about this in his seminal book, 2016, The Inevitable, that we're moving through a phase transition. And maybe what's different about this period, unlike, let's say, the Renaissance, is that we know that this is a Cambrian shift that we're experiencing. We actually know it's happening. We're aware that this Phygital moment is occurring. Whereas I think with the Renaissance, 150 years later, post-rationally, we call it history, we said that was the Renaissance event. Here we know we're witnessing it in real time. And in the workplace, post-COVID, we're not going back to work. I mean, most central business districts, CBDs, all over the world are half empty office towers, and the retail at the base is suffering. And so we're at that kind of interesting inflection point in terms of the future of work, the physical place we work, merging office and remote work. So we'll explore the concept of a Phygital workspace, blending super collaborative office environments. Maybe you go 3 days a week to like WeWork 2.0, or a co-work space, that the office becomes this really great place to collaborate, oxytocin, all those things about the 3D that you just can't get on Zoom. And at the same time, we get the flexibility of remote work and distributed teams that we can collaborate with all over the world. I think that that's really what the COVID moment kind of opened up for all of us. And really, that's why Next Collabs was spawned. It spawned coincident with that capacity to reach a global group of people who are intrinsically aligned around a North Star, who want to explore the future of everything. And then 4, we'll move on to the scale of the organization, strategic transformations, navigating continuous disruption, and discuss how organizations can integrate AI into their strategies to thrive amidst ongoing disruptive changes. Every organization, kind of like a smart city that adds AI, and we know that Google and Sidewalk Labs and Alphabet have been attempting to do that here in Toronto and other places. The equivalent of that for a smart organization, what does that look like? I think that's really the project for 2024, now that we know that AI is here and it's here to stay. And then finally, we just have this wonderful moment, this junction between 2023 and 2024, a chance to reflect and close with predictions and priorities for 2024, the next phase of AI, anticipating the trends and the focus areas for AI in the upcoming year. Charlene and I had a short discussion about that later in the day today. And some of the things for her that came up on the radar were obviously autonomous agents are coming sort of under the hood. Our own dev teams are using those right now in pipelines to automate business processes. And of course, I think we finished the book, The Coming Wave, a few months ago, and Mustafa Suleyman predicted that his product Pi, if you haven't tried Pi, I highly recommend it. You can find it on your iPhone in the App Store. That personal AI is going to be ubiquitous in 12 to 18 months. So that's really, really significant. And so that's the agenda for the session. Relative to what I just explained, I'm going to give you a kind of a sneak peek of something we're working on here at Next Labs, and I think it's related to the future of work, and that's AI integrations. This is top of mind with the C-suite right now. We know it's here, and how do you onboard into it, and how you do it responsibly with responsible AI and safety and all these things. And here's like 3 levels that we've identified. The architecture of an organization, by integrating AI, is going to basically be able to leverage these 3 major areas. The most obvious one would be probably off-the-shelf tool sets that augment your workforce, and in a sense, not necessarily replace your workforce, more like create a super-powered workforce. It's almost the equivalent of Steven Kotler and peak performance for your workforce by really training up on these tool sets and amplifying their skills and talents and surfacing things that they weren't able to access before, and having more time to do, let's say, more advanced, more innovational things to grow the company. Below that is a vertical integration. So that was the horizontal augmentation of your workforce. The vertical automations and the power to get under the hood and find like huge, let's say, where you have a bottleneck in your pipeline, where that could get automated. Something that might take 40 days could be compressed to 12 minutes in your kind of pipeline. So that's huge. And then I think the thing that only came on the radar recently in conversation with someone that I met at this conference in San Francisco the past few days at the American Society for Artificial Intelligence, they thought, well, I just introduced them to Pi, and they said, well, that would be the 3rd layer, is the idea that each of us will have a personal AI co-pilot that will basically be, a one-on-one relationship that is almost like a meta intelligence that each of us will have access to. Plus, it will likely over the next year have automation qualities, and you're bringing that, each individual is bringing that to really a kind of a comprehensive, almost invention of what it means to be part of a team and a workforce in an organization. So when you add all these up, I think there's just a huge potential for AI to revolutionize effectively what an organization is. So I believe that's what 2024 is all about. So now, here's the agenda. We're going to go to our speakers next, and they're going to give an introduction to their book and their work. But I thought, just to make this interesting, and let me put on share sound, we'd start with AI. And I asked Pi, again, if you don't know what Pi is, PI, that stands for personal intelligence. Go to inflection.ai, either on the website or on your phone in the App Store, inflection.ai. This is Mustafa Suleyman's company. He was the founder of DeepMind back in 2014. They did AlphaGo. You've probably saw that Netflix special. Fast forward to, I think, 2022 or late 2021, he founded with Reid Hoffman inflection.ai, devoted to creating personal AI. And PI, out of the box, is already ready for prime time. You're going to love it. I highly recommend getting on it. But with that, I'm going to give it over to Pi to introduce our speakers, and then our speakers are going to give their introductions to the respective work.
Gotcha. here's the updated intro. Tonight, we're thrilled to have two experts on the future of work and disruptive transformations joining us. Charlene Lee, author of The Disruption Mindset, and Gary Bolles, author of The Next Rules of Work. Together, they'll explore how organizations can navigate the fast-paced changes that are taking place in the world of work and how AI is revolutionizing the way we work. They'll be sharing their insights on how to prepare for the future and stay ahead of the curve. Please welcome Charlene and Gary.
Okay, with that, let's start with Charlene. And Charlene and Gary, hi and welcome to BookFlow. Really glad we've got you together here for this session on the future of work plus AI. Did Charlene make it? I don't see her.
Yeah, Charlene's here.
Okay, great. Let me spotlight, both of you on the same. Okay, just a moment. Give me a sec here. And then I'll get Gary on there. Okay, there we go. Okay, over to you, Charlene, and the disruption mindset and your thoughts about disruption mindset plus AI.
Sure. So the disruption mindset, I'll just give a very quick overview. I wrote this because people kept asking me, so disruption is a really important thing. How do you actually do it? And I didn't have a good answer. So when I don't know the answer to something, I do research, and sometimes a book pops out. And so the way I think about disruption, and in particular having a disruption mindset, is that you see disruption as an opportunity for change. And we oftentimes look for disruption with the hope that it's going to drive growth, but it's actually just the opposite. It's growth that creates disruption. Because when you're growing exponentially, you're having to change so many things. And therefore, all those changes is actually very disruptive. So many organizations want to grow, but they don't prepare themselves for all the change. They expect that growth and innovation is going to be easy, that it's going to follow a timeline and a budget. And we know that's not how it happens. So to prepare for disruption, I recommend three things. First of all, to see the future through the eyes of your future customers. Because when you can see the future, again, not from the perspective of your organization, but of these customers that may not exist yet, you do everything possible today to try to see them as clearly as possible. So the organizations that are really good at driving disruption and doing it over and over again are the ones who focus squarely on the future, and in particular, where those new customers are going to come from. They're able to put on disruption sunglasses and not be blinded by their current beautiful, profitable customers. The second thing they do is that they realize that leadership needs to look very differently, to work differently, to drive a disruptive transformation, and that you have to create a movement. This is not something that normal everyday managing and leading is going to be successful at. And the third thing is really changing and taking a close look at your culture. You know that Peter Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. Well, what does your culture look like? Is it set up to drive disruptive transformations? And the way I looked at it is that culture is made up of just two things, beliefs and behaviors. And there are three common beliefs of disruptive organizations: openness, agency, and a bias for action. And so you can change your culture in some ways very, very quickly by systematically saying, we're not going to believe these beliefs that are holding us back. Instead, we're going to adopt these new ones and make sure they're reflected in behaviors of the organization. So that's a super, super fast overview of what the book is about. In the 4 years since the book was published, have been adopting it, applying it to many types of businesses that are across the board. And it is the foundational work for a lot of the work that I'm doing now in a book on generative AI strategy, and some of the work I'm doing with Next Collabs too, about bringing that to organizations. So we'll hear more about that later on today. All right,
I love that, Charlene. And maybe, Charlene, maybe you could introduce Gary and how you two have known each other and where it all started, and that'll segue over to Gary.
Oh my goodness, Gary, how long have we known each other? I can't even remember when we actually met. Years.
Yeah, dawn of time. Yeah.
I love talking to Gary because it's such a stimulating. I mean, we live about 1.5 miles away from each other too in San Francisco, at least for now. And I love the way Gary thinks and has always been so inspirational, just thinking not just about work, but about business and transformation. So Gary, over to you to talk about your wonderful book.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's completely mutual, Charlene. So I want to thank everybody for who's already part of the Next community and those who have joined us today. It's been an amazing journey, just a tremendous opportunity to be able to meet so many of you virtually. And Michael and I are doing our absolute best to try to meet as many people in person as we can as well. I just got back from a month-long lecture tour and spent quite a bit of time in Oz and in Aotearoa in New Zealand. So to those of you coming in from Australia, I was just in the Queensland government is a client of mine, and so I was just lecturing in Brisbane and then also in Sydney and Melbourne. So had a marvelous time there. It wasn't quite as warm as it is now, so I feel your pain as the summer comes along. So just really briefly to sort of set the table. So as Michael was saying, so I'm the author of The Next Rules of Work, a book that I wrote as this global pandemic thing was coming along. And the mantra of The Next Rules of Work is that we've always been impacted by the disruptive and exponential technologies. I'm the chair for the future work with Singularity University, where we sort of talk all the time about exponential technologies and leveraging them for business purpose and for impact. And so I talk about mindset, skill set, and tool set as the three legs of the stool, and how each of us as human beings continually navigate disruptive change. And so it's very, very important for us to have the framing that this AI moment, the things that are always predictable is that there will be technologies, exponential technologies that suddenly hit this hockey stick curve and suddenly go through massive adoption, and that's only going to increase. The pace and scale will only increase, it's very clear that increasingly these technologies are going to have a range of impacts on work. And so back in you might remember all the way back to February of 2020, I wrote an article for Techonomy called Welcome to the Great Reset. And I said, look, the global pandemic is probably just the first in a wave of impacts that we're going to have in the world of work and the ways that we're going to co-create the next rules of work. And I said, so today it's a pandemic, tomorrow it might be artificial general intelligence or some other AI type of breakthrough, and here we are. And so I wrote a series in my LinkedIn newsletter earlier this year, calling this the AI tsunami. And so the whole idea is that we're just going to keep having this wave after wave of new technologies, and as humans, we have to be able to sort of get our arms around the process by which we are co-creating, we're collaborating to be able to leverage these technologies. So some of the key takeaways are, certainly for what we've gone through this year, is technology always affects work. Going back to the plow and the loom weaver, work is really basically just three things. It's our human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. We're all problem solvers, and then along comes a set of tools that are very, very good at automating a whole variety of tasks. And we as humans, we have sort of two choices. There's always creative destruction, or in the case of some of the newer AI tools, creative creating. As Michael was saying, there's things that we can do that, in terms of generating really creative approaches to solving different problems that we might have taken either hours or days in the past, or we might not even have been able to do, or we needed to outsource to others, and now we can do ourselves. But what ends up happening is if we simply automate tasks, right? Human skills apply to tasks to solve problems, and we just focus on automating tasks, then what ends up happening is a lot of times human work either gets disrupted, it gets displaced. That means they have to move to something new, or you get replaced. The technology just sort of automates a job to make it go away, which is one of the greatest fears in the rise of the robots. And so we can shift the strategy collectively. All of us instead can be focusing on what we think of as enhancing human capacity, our human skills, in solving new problems that we've never encountered before, in developing superpowers, in developing super collaboration. And so those are all the positive sides of the ledger that I think we all want to be able to co-create what those next rules can be. And so I'm looking forward to bouncing ideas around with Charlene and with all of you. Is, you know, so we're at this pretty unique time where this is as Charlene was saying, so if the key characteristics for organizations are openness, agency, and bias for action, let's all be open with each other about what we're doing, how we're solving these problems together. Let's all have the agency where we're trying to leverage them, because we're, you know, many of us are the people that are the ones to workshop these and try to leverage them and figure out how they can be best used for advantage, both personally, but individually, for our teams, for our organizations, and hopefully for society as well. And then what's our bias to action? What are the ways we can actually apply using these tools in ways that are most beneficial?
Okay, thanks for that overview, Gary. Very comprehensive. I mean, my thought was that we could start with the first topic, get you both to weigh in on your initial perceptions of like when this started and how, you know, was it a gathering storm? Did you, let me frame this out. Reflections on 2023, the year of OpenAI. And Charlene, I mean, was AI on your radar? I mean, AI has been, you know, 60 years in the making, and suddenly it burst into the mainstream. What are your perceptions about that moment? And over the past year, what are some of the highlights for you personally? What kind of tools are you using? What are you deploying? You're on mute.
It caught me and so many other people by surprise. And if you look back at the reporting, even OpenAI didn't think that much about when they released 3.5. They thought maybe a couple people would write about it. The New York Times was just reporting. And so it took everyone by surprise how compelling people found it to be. And it's because the interface just made it so accessible. And the democratization of AI, that anybody could use it, you could begin to see almost immediately just how powerful it could be. And so I was actually working on a completely different book, and then had started working on it. And then this came along, and I was just like, okay, drop that one, pick up this one instead. Because my experience was, I've seen this before, but not this fast. I mean, I came into Silicon Valley in 1993 with the intent of working with newspapers that I thought would be disrupted because of the internet. And the World Wide Web was invented the year I graduated from business school. So I've been in this space for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Not the speed at which it's come. It's very, very different. It's not another trend like blockchain or Web3. This is fundamentally different. And unfortunately, I think many businesses, and especially people in technology, have been approaching it as if it's another enterprise technology that it can be controlled and managed and gradually adopted into the enterprise. Whereas the reality is people are using it left and right, and the controllability of it is very, very low. So it raises a huge amounts of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges for how organizations are going to deal with this. So my my use of it, when I started using it a year ago, what I quickly realized that is that about 70% of the things that I do, my tasks, as Gary says, have fundamentally changed. The way I write, the way I do research, the way I think about problems, the way I brainstorm ideas, even my interactions of how I run meetings, if I even have meetings anymore. My work day and my work activities just look fundamentally different from a year ago. So,
I mean, when you think about it, like post COVID, even the fact remote work came on so strong, and it's here to stay. That alone would be enough. But then we got AI. And where were you, Gary, at the AI moment? And when, you know, what were your thoughts? And obviously AI has been on your radar for a while related to the future of work, but suddenly it surfaced and burst on the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the benefit of a wonderful network of innovators who have pointed me to some of the tools, you know, in some of their earlier phases, and I've got a chance to play with some of them. But I would agree with Charlene. I'd say even when you can talk about the characteristics of what you think is coming, that's theory. And then something like ChatGPT comes out, ChatGPT 3.5 especially, And now it's practice. Like you can actually see it, you can actually use it. It has and in this case, an extraordinary level of usability. So what I'm fond of saying is, from an infrastructure standpoint, what we're all experiencing right now is like the internet, but it's on internet time. If you think of all the infrastructure we put in place, I co-founded something called Interactive Week, a magazine back in 1993 that became the internet's first newspaper. And we said we thought there were going to be all these layers of infrastructure that we're going to be building. And we called it internet time at the time, and we thought it was fast. But it turns out once all those layers are in place, and then you add AI, now suddenly you can get 2 million people using a new app in a month. And so, so what ends up happening is the pace and the scale we think we're prepared for, and then, when it's practice, when we see the thing, it opens up, unlocks all of this new value. And so, as Charlene says, you can, especially those of us that can leverage the new tool set, it can really be transformative. The challenge is that many of us at least, are sort of change junkies. That is, we've been through these cycles. I've been through Silicon Valley cycles since the early 1980s. And so we're kind of optimized to be able to deal with these changes. And there's a whole bunch of people that are not, for whom this is just, it's a deer in headlights moment, because it's so stunning. They really weren't very digital in many of the things that they were doing before. And then along come these technologies, and it creates a whole bunch of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's a shock and awe when we see these tools, and that's really what I think our collective opportunity is to be able to help everybody to be able to navigate the AI moment, and to make sure that there's no human left behind.
What seems to differentiate this moment, and Roy Vela has put this in the chat, no one's lived through an exponential curve quite like this yet. This is entirely new. I mean, we talk about this within Next Collabs. Is this even behave in a way that is conforming with the hype cycle? I mean, does this transcend a hype cycle? What are your thoughts, Charlene?
Hype cycle is dependent on a certain adoption rate and by organizations, where the hype is not necessarily followed by fast adoption. The difference here is that it's not dependent on companies adopting the technology. It's really about consumers taking it into work and using it on their phones, on their computers, through a web browser with no oversight whatsoever. So it is a very, very different animal. And because of that, I think it defies what the hype cycle looks like. The closest equivalent I have to it is social media. Because again, it was not something that was controllable by organizations, and that also defied what the hype cycle would actually look like if you look back in time.
Gary, what are your thoughts relative to the nature, how this is behaving? That this is something that also behaves according to like continuous change. It's not necessarily a kind of a steady. It's more like a hockey stick moment rather than a kind of gentle curve. It's like an exponential shift in space. Like almost like musical space, where you get this shift.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So a couple of things. So first off, if those of you that are familiar with Gartner's curve, it kind of goes like this. It's a roller coaster. It goes up and it hits what's called the peak of inflated expectations. And Gartner has placed generative AI in the most recent version of the model, which was released last month, at the top of the roller coaster. And then in their model, it would go down because it deflated. It didn't meet the expectations. And so I think Charlene's right. I think what's different is that it took time, but these digital distraction devices that we all walk around with, these were actually initially rejected by many enterprises. And it wasn't until humans started carrying these so often into the workplace that the companies had to realize, oh, we'll come up with this new thing called BYOD, bring your own device. Go ahead. Okay, yeah, you could use your phone and work. And so Charlene's exactly right. It's here we have a technology totally egalitarian, totally available to people, and whether the enterprise wants them to or not. What's different is that people are taking these tools and they're applying them to specific problems that they're solving, activities in their own work. And if the enterprise isn't supporting it, they're still doing it in the same way that they used to be continually texting their friends, when they were in the office, even when phones were forbidden. So what is likely to be different is that What happens when it goes down the roller coaster and then comes back up again is over in this phase is it starts to be embedded into the woodwork of other things. And that's one of the reasons it takes so long to really catch up to the hype is actual operational, operationalizing it and baking it into things. And, we used to talk about the internet as if it was a separate thing, and we don't even talk about the internet anymore. It's part of the woodwork. And that's what's very likely to happen with a lot of the generative AI tools is very, very quickly, because they have APIs, application program interfaces, people are baking them into other things that they're doing, and that will keep the curve. It'll just, we'll just bump up another curve. The example is we just had dinner the other night with my old friend Dave Sifry, who was involved in Technorati, one of the early social networks. And Dave has a new program called Questy.ai. And I asked him, so Dave, how many people helped you to build this app? Because it's a pretty functional, it's a basically, generative AI, but with, for researchers that gives sources and all that sort of stuff. And he said, nobody. Did it on my own. Well, how many people would that have taken in a previous era? And he said, I can't even answer that question, because I would have had to raise money. I would have had to build a team of 6 or 7 developers. I would have had to buy servers. I would have all this infrastructure depending upon the era. And, by that time, all the technology would have changed. And now I've got the ability to just build these apps on my own and run the experiment, get them out there and let others play with them. And that's just a sea change. That's just a totally different way that the wave works when those technologies so rapidly become embedded into other technologies.
There's been a lot of chat in the sidebar here. Maybe Mark, could you unmute and just, read your chat or just amplify your thought around, really, I think Brad concurs, like we've just gone through V1 of AI and now we're moving into V2. What are your thoughts? Mark?
Yeah, sure. So what I wrote was that it's really about talking about the second half of the chessboard. And I was sharing that over a decade ago when I gave my talks for organizations and received a lot of blank stares of like people not really understanding what that meant, and it all seemed very far from their bed shows. And obviously nowadays it's completely different, where people sort of understand that something is about to happen, to disrupt. Because we have now entered the second half of the chessboard. We are now living in exponential times. and I think being able to really truly grasp what this means is very hard for people. Simply because we humans, we are not good at thinking exponentially, and we're not built for that. And I think that's sort of the challenge that a lot of organizations face. That if you don't have any exponential thinkers within your organization, you're not going to grasp the implications of whatever is happening at the moment for your business. And I think that will also shows the difference between those organizations who are able to deal with this exponential change and those who don't. And I think that sort of for me is a crucial knowledge gap that organizations need to overcome. They need to see and learn what the second half of the chessboard means and how fast disruption will happen in the coming years.
Well, thanks, Mark. Maybe Brad, you could also just add your take on it.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks, Charlene, and thanks, Gary. Good to see you guys. What comes to mind for me is what used to be called FANG and now is called MAMO. It used to be Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, that now is Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and Alphabet. Is the idea that these companies have more data points than anyone else, and it's unfathomable. Roy has done an excellent job of explaining scale of like 1,000, million, and billion, that the level of data, the gap there is so massive, and not just in data points in dollars. I like to think that if you sued a $1 trillion company, they could spend $1 million a day on a lawyer for 38,000 years. 38,000 years, they could spend $1 million a day lawyer on you. So you can't engage a company like that. And the data points are so vast. I wonder, as you're saying, version 1, Gary, of the Gartner curve reaches its peak, I think that the next iteration of wearables and we can't even fathom it yet, will climb up and climb up and climb up. I refer to these big companies as the castle. I wonder, can our slings and arrows penetrate the castle, or will the castle continue to grow? Is there room on the landscape for a new castle? Is there room for the castle to open up, or are we in a century of 5 large castles that have data and dollars? What are your thoughts?
Charlene?
Yeah, I think there are some inherent issues around the base foundational models, just sheer computing and data, that are difficult. But then I look at Mistral, which is this, open source thing out of France, who has something that's come out that's pretty good. So they don't have the biggest model out there. It's not going to be the best model out there, but it's really good and it's cheap. And that's going to power a lot more enterprises that I think ChatGPT-4 will be. Because it's very expensive to use GPT-4, and you probably don't need all of that power to get the things that you need done in the enterprise. So I think a lot of the, there's a lot of incumbent and network effects that come from being the big guys out there. I think the GPT store will be very, very interesting, which is what OpenAI is really building on. But I think the real opportunity is going to be operationalizing this for the enterprise. That's where the money has always been. And so that space, I think, is very, very open. We got Anthropic doing some interesting things. We got the marketplace with Hugging Face. So this is not done. It's not even close to being done.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest question marks and one of the potential challenges, and hopefully that we can see as an opportunity to mitigate, is that in previous waves of disruptive technologies, often there's a variety of different innovators, and in previous iterations of Silicon Valley, you were able to build companies, independent companies of consequence. And what I've written about quite a bit about this moment that is concerning is that the major platforms either are part of the incumbent tech companies, or incumbent tech companies have already usurped them. That has given them a ton of money. And what I think we all need to support is the kind of innovation that Charlene was talking about, is to support especially the, not the standardized platforms, but to do as much as possible to try to distribute our attention and our use of the tools, because otherwise what we'll get is the same winner takes all approach, right? There's one Google, there's one Facebook, one Amazon, one eBay, and that's, because of a variety of dynamics. But the venture-backed companies are often, their investors are optimizing to sell to one of the major companies, because that's, the more likely outcome. And so this is where I think we need to be balancing. And then Charlene's right. The other is around implementation. Is there's always going to be a lot of services and the process around usage where there's a tremendous opportunity. And that's one of the reasons for Next Collabs. Is one of the models for that is going to be a collaborative community that's going to basically co-create what the next roles are together.
Okay, let's pivot to question number 2, or topic number 2. The workforce and employment. That's one of the big topics right now in the C-suite. Automating people away or augmenting them and superpowering your workforce. 2 very different ways of looking at the future of AI. And I think both of you are pro the workforce, and how do we steer this in the direction that we consciously shape our workforce by amplifying it, enabling people to get beyond even just the singular role, kind of pre-AI, almost like the old rules of work, and the current kind of, update by adding AI and super sort of powering your workforce and potential creativity, etc. So what are your thoughts, Charlene, on this big question of employment and your workforce?
For those people who, again, I think most people here have been using it, and what you realize is that you gain these superpowers. I think of it as you're given a magic wand, and you really don't know what to do with a magic wand. We've never seen one before. We don't know how to use it. We don't understand the power of it. And we're discovering along the way, oh, I can do these amazing things I never thought we could do before. And so in the beginning, of course, we're going to be really pretty basic. We're just going to have it, dust the floor. So we don't have to dust the floor anymore. But What if you could actually create things that you could never have done? What if you could fly? And so what's the equivalent of that? We're just at the very beginning of this. So, and again, we're just limited by the scope of our imagination. And the things that I've seen some organizations do has been incredible. The studies show that you take new people coming in, they increase their competencies and their proficiency exponentially and very, very quickly. And so you raise the competencies of everybody across the board, but it's also just acting as another team member, a member of your sales team, another member of your design team, that is increasing the quality of the work across the board. So we're just beginning to tap into the augmentation. And if the focus can stay on the augmentation, much more so than this dispiriting, very negative point of view, yes, tasks are going to go away, and certain jobs with that will go away. And for the most part, people are very happy that those mundane tasks are going away. I hear from people that joy is coming back into work because of this. So again, the changes I've seen of some of the early adopters, to a company I've talked to, they have not seen it as a cost-cutting way to reduce the workforce. They have used it as always an opportunity to say, how do we augment it so that we can grow without adding people, without adding a tremendous amount of cost? When else have we ever had the opportunity to grow our business without a significant increase in people and resources investments? Never have seen a time like that before. So we're going to take full advantage of this and augment our people as much as possible.
I mean, and that sounds like a real good news story. And obviously something that you talk about a lot in your book is the idea of the culture. And if that's the messaging, like you're going to get your people on side and you're going to enhance your culture versus if you're automating people away, that is just going to that's just creating a black hole within your organization.
Yeah, well, let me just, the companies I've talked to, I asked them, how did you put your strategy together? And to a company, they all said, we started with our principles, we started with our values. We looked at how do we address issues around workforce. And they said, this is how we treat our people. This is how we dealt with them during COVID. We tried everything to retain people and to use them in different ways, even though it was going to be very expensive. But they made that commitment in COVID, and they're going to make that commitment again with generative AI. So this is very consistent with the core of their values and their beliefs. And I think one of the interesting things about 2023 is we actually started talking about ethics and values and principles in the context of business and technology. And up to this point, we rarely did. So I think it's a huge sea change for us to actually be thinking about ethical and responsible uses of AI and the implications for the workforce. It's a very, very healthy thing that we start with our principles and our values when thinking about any of these new tools.
I love that. Gary, in terms of the sort of great unlock moment that probably all of us have experienced, that moment when you first started with ChatGPT and you drop into a flow state and you go, oh my God, like suddenly, like I've just amplified myself 10x, maybe 100x. And then it becomes almost a part of your thought process. Like, I got to do an RFP. Oh my God, I don't really want to do that. I could use ChatGPT, drop it in, boom, and like suddenly you drop into a flow state. So what are your perceptions of how these tool sets are really influencing, let's say, the workforce and employment? And what's your take?
So as always, I agree with Charlene. It's and especially when you could talk to these strategic decision makers, and when they do reinforce their values and they do have this commitment to helping people to be able to continue to have access to meaningful, well-paid work. I always show it as a table, like a power dynamic. And if you've got people who lead organizations that have that commitment, then it's a much more balanced table. There are, unfortunately, I think too many organizations where it's an unbalanced table. The power dynamic is out of whack. And the people who have less power are often the ones whose work is affected. So if you're answering phones in a call center, it would be ideal if the power dynamic is such that the people who lead the organization say, well, you're going to be you're going to be able to use these tools to be able to answer much more complicated problems much faster than you did before. However, there's also a lot of people that are saying, wait, how many people in the Philippines can we lay off because we don't need them anymore? And so it's always a power dynamic every time technology impacts work. And so one of the things we need to continually have the mindset about is advocating for those that have that less power. The more agency you have, the more you love these tools. But there's always canaries in the coal mine. The people that I know that are like the freelance graphic artists and freelance writers, and they're the ones that are freaking out because they're either being told that the clients aren't interested in them anymore, or, well, you used to write 1 article a week, now I want you to do 10. And so that power dynamic, so long as we're continually using it to be able to leverage the tools to be able to create meaningful, well-paid work for people, that is awesome. And what we want is as Charlene was saying, to encourage the people who lead or decision makers within organizations to continually double down on those values, to continually double down on the human-centric mindset that these tools can be so empowering, because they're only going to continue to get better. The functionality is only going to increase. And if more organizations do that, the next wave of kinds of work that are affected, you're going to see pretty significant impact on some of the consulting companies, for instance, who may need less workers, or there's different organizations that are going to experience the next wave and the next wave of what this automation can do. And now is the time to be able to double down on those human-centric commitments.
Dr. Harvey Castro, I saw your comment. You call it the great shift, the shift in work, shift, and then job description. Do you want to comment on that? Just amplify your thoughts that were in the chat. Is he on the phone? Okay. Okay, why don't we, any other thoughts? If anyone has any comments, raise your hand or, pipe in, and then we'll shift to the next one.
I want to just respond to Anil's point, which about when AI becomes more autonomous. So one of the things I think that's important for us to just recognize, obviously, is we've already got a lot of autonomous technologies out there. The percentage, for instance, of automated stock trades is about 70%. There's not a human pulling the switch on that stock trade. So we've already got a lot of autonomous artificial intelligence and machine learning software out there. And there's a lot of the discussion, which I'm happy to have if people want, but around artificial general intelligence and that sort of thing, which I call a false god. And the reason is that these applications are simply going to be automating more and more tasks. Applications will use applications. Applications will create applications. And so you're just going to have a lot of humans that will want technology that's doing more and more things. And increasingly, a lot of that will be autonomous, or at the very least, they'll be kicked off by humans, but then they'll run as agents. That's one of the sort of next trends that we were talking about. What's really important is that we're all very clear on the business models of the companies that are creating those applications, those technologies, and then we're buying into what the positive uses of them are, and then some of the potentially negative impacts. There's not a lot of people in society that believe the society is significantly better because there's a lot of robots that are doing stock trades. That's not the way the stock market sort of used to function, and it has a lot of negative impacts on our economy and our society because of the concentration of wealth. And so that's the same sort of thing with more and more autonomous software, is kind of guaranteed. More and more software will be using and creating software, and will be running on its own. And then the question is, well, what do each of us? What do we want to reinforce in terms of the business models of the use of those technologies? And what are the ways, again, that we make sure that the results are very human-centric?
Anil, you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Gary, for taking the question. And I want to amplify your point, which is that research has shown that eventually those who have the education, highly educated people, are the ones who are able to make use of AI, and the people who are not fully educated, so their work is so easily automated that they're not able to use the AI. So that this sort of begs the question of education. What would education mean moving forward? Would it be sort of continuous education is already here, but what would it mean to be educated faster? And what would be the limitation? I mean, Charlene, you talked about imagination's our limit, but it is a limit, right? What expands imagination? How do you expand people's consciousness? What would it take to educate to be able to use AI more effectively for more people? Thank you.
Well, I look at this one beautiful tool called Magic School AI. I was talking to a teacher, a middle school teacher, and she uses it all the time. She's a math and robotics teacher. And I create lesson plans. I make sure it's compliant with California standards. I create rubrics and assignments. In fact, she makes sure that it's AI-proof assignments. So she puts it into the AI to help her actually make it. And she goes, it takes a fraction of the time to create these new lesson plans. And the hope, I think, is that right now you have to teach everybody the same thing in the same way. But if you can put into the AI, this is the way that each of my 30 students learns differently. And it'll generate content that puts it in a way that they can understand and absorb it in problem sets according to their passions and interests, or their learning styles. Are they visual or auditory learners? So all of those things we're just on the cusp of discovering. And there are no tools to do that right now. And Magic School AI just came on the scene just a few months ago. So this is literally changing overnight. And I think our educators, again, I just saw a stat that said the U.S. Department actually went through all the departments and said, how many use cases do you have? The U.S. Department of Education has one use case for generative AI right now. One. That's it. And so we are in a world of hurt that we have no idea, even our basic administrative organizations don't know how to use this, how to think about it.
No, I totally agree, Charlene. This is not a good topic to get me started on because, as Mr. Prensky knows, I rail about this all the time. So the problem is that we have this industrial era model of education that our schools have instantiated, and yet we have these breakthrough tools that it's not even a calculator moment. It's a leapfrog moment, and the problem is that so much of our schools today are focused on tasks and are focused on the repetition of tasks and using tests to be able to determine whether our kids can perform those tasks rather than on problem solving, creativity, and the outputs of the process. We want our existing system is designed to ensure kids follow exactly the steps that they're supposed to get the result they're supposed to. And so that's got to change. And that I think there's tremendous examples. Another one, Charlene, is Squirrel AI Learning. We actually had them on the stage when I was executive producer for Singularity University's Global Summits. We had them on stage 5 years ago, and they have, at one point they had 1 million learners in China using AI-fueled software to be able to help them to be able to learn science and math. And so once we accept how much the system of education needs to change, the aperture gets opened up. And then, as you were saying, Charlene, we can just change the entire experience for the teacher because we've, especially in the United States, loaded so many things onto the teacher's shoulders, including the culture wars that we're currently going through, that if we can take a lot of that really repetitive stuff off the shoulders of teachers and allow them just to focus on nurturing and helping, especially those that have the greatest learning challenges, that is a watershed moment for education.
Nick, you have a question? Or go ahead, Charlene, if you want to respond to that.
I was going to say, it also applies to the way we run our organizations. Most managers get promoted because they know how to do the job better than anyone else, so they can teach people how to do the job. But when the AI can teach everyone how to do the job and people can do the job better than the managers, then what's the role of a manager? And it is to what Gary was saying is how do you facilitate to get the most out of people's potential? And so the reason you get promoted is because you're a good manager, not because you know how to do a job well, because you know actually how to manage people, to lead people, to encourage them to reach their full potential. It
No, I
changes.
totally agree.
everything.
That's a mindset. What you just talked about. That's a mindset. Yeah.
Over to you, Nick. You have a question? You're on mute.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on this, on the last couple of comments about management. And there's nothing new, honestly, in what was just said. The role of a manager has rarely been to be the best at whatever they people they're managing. I mean, that's, I remember a long time ago, decades ago, when I was hiring somebody and I said to my manager, I think they're brighter than me. I'm not sure I can manage them. And his comment at the time was, hey, you get everybody brighter than you, and you will have no problems. You will rise with what the work they do. But that's just a general comment. I want to come back to this whole issue of how businesses behave ethically and how they will maintain the concept of improving people's abilities and a whole bunch of great stuff, which will happen. But it'll happen, I would suggest, firstly, in the larger organizations. And I think when the economy changes, as it may well be doing in the next few months even, you're going to have a lot of organizations that will downsize without giving up on their productivity as a result of generative AI in part, but AI generally. I guess I should put a question in there because I was sort of stating stuff, but do you agree with this view? I guess is really what I'm asking.
Well, what does downsize mean? Downsize means is for the certain amount of work that you're doing now, then you're going to use less humans,
Yes.
right? So you just get rid of them. And so I would say that's one future of work. There's another future of work where instead you say, here's the problems we're solving now for our current customers. And somebody like Charlene Lee comes along and says, well, wait a minute, what about your future customer? What are the ways you're going to create value for them? And all of these humans that you would have laid off in a downsizing instead have superpowers, leveraging the tools to be able to create the new products and services you're going to be providing for your future customers, and you never lay off a single human being. So this is the impact from a productivity standpoint is technology always has this impact of helping us to be able to do things with, hopefully less time and money. And then as I think we started off the conversation saying, if we got the power dynamic right, then an organization should be able to leverage the same or even more humans to be able to create even more value.
Fair enough, but again, I would suggest a lot of our views on what works and what has happened in the past have been based on 40 years of expanding economies. And that has made an enormous difference to options.
My thinking is that there is economic pressure from all areas right now. And so many companies, even now today, could just take all these savings straight to the bottom line. But they also know, again, that's always an option. And some companies will do that. But I think the more strategic companies, and especially you saw this with COVID, the ones who didn't just hide, who didn't just cut costs, but actually invested in opportunities and growth. They saw disruption, and again, they saw opportunities. They didn't see disruption and say, let's go hide and try to minimize and cut a way out of this. They said the only way we're going to go to survive this is not to just survive, but to thrive and grow out of it. So you'll always have these two camps, and there will always be different people who see these different opportunities. So yes, but I don't think it's ever a universal thing that everyone is going to cut jobs and everyone is going to invest, because people will just look at the world very differently. I'm a realist optimist to think that there will be some people who actually see the opportunities and will invest even in the downturns. That's always been the case. You see that the biggest winners coming out of recessions are the ones who invested. And so you can look at that landscape and decide, I'm going to prepare now to make sure I have enough cash in the bank, that I've made my initial investments into generative AI now so I can get as many gains as possible, so that when the downturn comes, I'm as prepared as possible to weather that storm. And this is where that resilience comes from, and that ability to prepare for the future today. So, and that's what a lot of these early adopters are doing. That's exactly what they're doing.
I love that, Charlene. Alan, over to you. Question, comment. You're on mute.
After Roy's comment, I'm a little intimidated. I think the companies are going to be downsizing and they're going to be growing simultaneously. So if you're part of an organization that's considered, part of the growth chain, then you're probably going to be amplified by AI. And if you're part of the organization, which is part of the cost chain, you're probably going to be replaced by AI. And both those things are going to be happening simultaneously. What I would like to see, and my hope for the future, is that AI does not just increase the speed of the rat race, but actually grants people free time. So I'm hoping that in my daughter's generation, which is younger than most of the people here, that they're going to say, no, I don't need to work 40 hours a week anymore. I can get away with 32 or maybe even 24 and be productive enough that everyone's happy. And I don't have to work 60 hours with the AI to get 120% of what I was, or 500% of what I was getting before AI. So I'm hoping the new generation will do better than boomers who would have been workaholics and would have just run faster and faster once the treadmill runs faster. So I'd appreciate your thoughts on where you think we're going in terms of the rat race and the treadmill, and how are these AIs going to make life better for us, not just more productive.
Well, Gary, you just finished a month-long deep dive into next gen and the future of work in Australia. Maybe you want to comment on just the way generations are adapting.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm especially interested to hear Charlene's thoughts, so I'm going to keep it short. So basically, you're right, Alan. Here's the thing, though. Again, these are all human decisions, right? These are not results of the technology. These are decisions that people who pay for work make. And so you suddenly can basically automate 20% of all the tasks of a team. What are your decisions? You can lay off 20%. We've already said that doesn't sound like a great thing for humans. You could give them each a day a week to innovate and come up with the products and services for your future customers. Google has had 20% time for certain engineers for quite some time. Or you can give that 20% time back to the human beings, because they're still outputting the same amount that they did before. Or you could say, no, you now have to do 40% more work, because you got to figure out how to continually leverage the tools for more output, and I'm not going to raise your pay. As a matter of fact, I might even drop your pay because the tools are doing so much of the work. And so those are all you can think of as rational decisions. What do we want? What do we want as humans? And so the ideal, obviously, would be that we all have a commitment that, hey, we should all have lives, and especially young people demand it. They want that optionality. As I think Elisa would be the first one to tell us. They want that optionality. And there's a lot of people who lead organizations that are coming to the realization that those old rules of work around productivity and output, that those need to be changing. Those expectations that people are going to just basically continue to kill themselves for their work. It's not just a young generation. It's a new species, and that are far more intentional about the balance in their lives, and the role that work plays in their lives. And many of them are simply not going to sign up for the rules that their parents followed.
I think
Thanks.
on that one,
Appreciate that.
we definitely
Good
need
answer.
to do a special episode on next gen. So look forward to doing that in the coming months. Charlene, what are your thoughts?
My thought is that work is one of the most important relationships we have in our lives, and it's pretty broken. And we of a certain generation have just accepted it, that this is the way it is. And the younger generation just does not accept that. I just was looking at a stat that 54% of younger people, younger workers say they would quit a job if they didn't feel like they belonged there, that there was a sense of belonging, not just of diversity and equity and inclusion, but they actually belonged. Belonging is a relationship. It's a sense that this is my tribe, these are my people, I'm safe here, and I'm going to be able to contribute in a way that's fully authentic to me. And if we were to start thinking about work as a relationship that we wanted to foster and have thriving, we would approach work in a very different way. So when people ask me, how do you think about the future of work? And I go, you think about the kind of relationship that you want. What kind of relationship do you want with each other, with yourself, with your coworkers, with your employees? If you don't know what that looks like, then how can you define what the future of work is going to look like? But when you can clearly define what that relationship looks like, then you have a fighting chance of answering every question about how to treat people, how to think about generative AI. These are the core things that you bring as principles and values, the things that make us very human, is how do we relate to each other? So I go back to these very basic principles about what work should look like, what work could look like. And if we take a much more humane and relation-oriented approach to it, we start answering things with very logical answers like, yeah, we should not be killing ourselves because we can't bring our best selves to work. We shouldn't be expecting people to be on call all the time because you never get a break. You're not bringing your freshest self. So many things that just become very logical when you break these old rules of work and look at the new rules.
I love that. Okay, Eugene, good to have you here. And what's your question, comment?
It's not so much of a question, it's more of a comment. The whole idea about AI in school has been something, because I'm a graduate student in University of North Texas right now. And this is one of the topics that has been widely debated in the school among a lot of faculty. And one of the things that people have been talking about is the role of AI in changing the way how these universities are operating. And by and large, the major consensus is that in another couple of years' time, the skill sets that the students are going to learn from the universities are no longer going to be applicable in the workforce. And a lot of them are basically saying that, I don't need to go to the university to go figure out how do I make certain chemicals. All I need to do is just use ChatGPT and I can get the answers and stuff like that. So there is a lot of contention at this point in time in terms of the hard skills, because hard skills are something that is very easily replicable. It's very easily obtained. And one of the meetings that I attended a couple of weeks ago, my professor was basically saying that right now, in the past, like probably 10 years ago, computer programmers were highly sought after and they were really well paid. But right now, computer programmers are really scrambling to find jobs because ChatGPT can actually do the programming much better than a lot of programmers. And this is really changing the whole landscape of the whole IT department or the IT school itself. And the main thing that a lot of them are basically saying is that it's the universal human skills are still the most important thing. And they basically categorize them into 3 survival skills, which are the creative cognitive skills, interpersonal skills, and also the intrapersonal skills. So things like adaptation, creativity, communication, collaboration, self-management, organizations, and things like that, which are the soft skills, will become extremely handy And it will literally be the more important than hard skills, because right now a lot of companies are basically employing people based on the hard skills. Okay, what degree do you have? What, things and stuff like that do you have and stuff like that? What can you bring to the organization? But the table is now turning against employers right now. And so that's basically what I gathered thus far in terms of how the dynamics of the organization will be transforming in another couple of years' time.
Absolutely wonderful comment, Eugene. I love the expanded comment. Gary, on the skill set side, like he just explained and kind of outlined a whole series of skill sets that are like beyond tech, right? It's all these like first principle, like human first skill sets that sort of rise to the top. Maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, just really briefly, there's research going back literally to the 1940s that sort of group skills into two categories. Bodies of knowledge that are anchored or rooted, which I call know skills, K-N-O-W skills, and skills that are flexible, that are used in a wide range of situations, that I call flex skills. And of course, we've ended up calling these hard skills and soft skills. And there's nothing soft about the flexible skills, flex skills that are usable in a range of situations, and they're the ones you would imagine. It's the human ability to be creative, to be able to do collaboration, to be able to solve problems, to be able to manage our our own emotions and those sorts of things. Those are usable in a wide range of situations, and those bodies of knowledge are not as hard as they used to be in many fields. The shelf life is really evaporating. And so these skills, we've said, especially in the young adult launchpad period we call college, these skills of the flex ones, we've sort of left to chance. Like, we haven't explicitly taught them. And we focused on all this rote learning and memorization for for these know skills, the bodies of knowledge. And so the calculus has to shift. We get much more explicitly teach these flex skills, because that's increasingly what employers are going to demand, and especially for a younger generation that has not had the traditional kinds of exposure, affected by the pandemic, may never actually have worked in a traditional workplace. And so those are the skills that we're going to need to double down on all throughout our educational experiences, and especially in the workplace.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think the basic skills like coding, yes, AI is very good at it, but it's not that good at it. And the skill that's really needed isn't the core bug checking and the reading of the skills. It's actually reviewing it to make sure it's right. Because it takes a skilled coder to actually understand, did it even get it, approach it the right way? Because it's very error prone. So we still need coders, but we need more experienced coders, not necessarily the junior people. And what's a great thing about AI is that they're upskilling to that level, that higher level, much more quickly. Now, the soft skills, even AI is really good at. One of my favorite things to do is to put in an org chart, describe all the different things, put in the transcripts of an interview, all the 360 reviews, and just do brainstorming, because trying to understand the organizational dynamics, the sentiments, the politics can be really hard for anybody coming into a new situation. And I find that AI is quite good at helping me think through how to approach the politics of a very complex organization. And nobody else can be my thought partner in that. We also see that artificial empathy is a really big thing, in that AI can actually be more empathetic than the human counterparts. Some great studies been looking at doctors, real doctors and AI generated doctors. The accuracy and also the empathy at which they responded was actually higher for both quality and empathy from the AI. So, and we have empathy fatigue in our healthcare workers, for example. So how could AI actually supplement and augment even those soft skills? To Gary's point, I think what we're lacking in schools, and this is what I was working on a book about wisdom. And I put into the chat earlier that schools have been about knowledge and skills and tasks, these hard skills. And to some extent, they give us life skills too as well. But they don't necessarily, they're not really great at helping us understand how to develop wisdom. And we don't teach wisdom. We have to learn it through experience. But what if you could actually systematically learn that? because that is the one thing that AI cannot do. It cannot, it may be able to express empathy, but it can't actually experience it. It can derive meaning and summarize things, but it can't create meaning out of thin air. It requires humans to do that. And so our human experience, our human empathy is what's absolutely unique to us. And there's no replacing of that. The things that bring each experience to that particular problem and situation is unique.
Well, first of all, we definitely need you to write that book, okay, about wisdom. We need that to be happening concurrently with the AI book, okay? And you got the perfect person to kind of weigh in here. Aliyah, thoughts on this topic related to wisdom, empathy, DEI, all those things, those skills. I call them, you know, like Web3 protocols, empathy. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to ask a question, Charlene. I so appreciate you coming twice for us, and I do similar work to you in my organization, and so I was curious about because I often find that scaling the work I do has been quite difficult in the sense of because you're right, the office politics, the different things going on. Like I kind of have to be like at my best game in order to make sure that I'm understanding everything that's going on. What are the specific tools that you find that have been helping you with navigating those organizational politics?
I literally use, again, I use Claude oftentimes because I can upload a ton of information into the prompt. I can literally put in descriptions. I can put in transcripts. I also use a private LLM sometimes. So if the transcripts are highly confidential, I don't want to put up there, even though they say they're not using the trainer model. I just don't trust it completely because there are data breaches and things. So depending on how confidential the information is, I just put in tons and tons of information into my prompt. And I'm also having the AI say, before you give me an answer, what other questions do you want to ask me, clarifying the situation so you can make the best recommendations. So I'm having this conversation with the AI back and forth to just, again, literally brainstorming the particular situation. It's like having a coach or a consultant or just another brainstorming partner sitting there with me. And again, I my workday is completely different. So anytime I have a question, I usually pull up my some AI, and I'm trying a bunch of different ones all the time to see where I get a better response. And it changes all the time. There's a study now that says ChatGPT isn't as accurate in December because it knows that you work less in December, so it's not putting as much effort out compared to May. So you just tell it it's not December, it's May, it'll actually give you better results. I mean, just little things like that. It's just crazy. If you put things in caps or say, this is really important to me, it'll give you better results. So it understands, you know, the importance and empathy for the user just by just doing simple little things like that to prompt the engineering, to engineer the prompts.
Well, go ahead, Aliyah.
Yeah. And then, I was just going to say, like something that came to mind in the like conversation was just, I wonder if AI actually will make universities more relevant. I feel like they've been like losing a bit of relevance kind of recently, but because it's like a space, like we so very rarely have third spaces or walkable communities, that actually it's the collaboration of individuals, right, using AI and having and especially because universities are filled with young people, right, who are much more in tune with technology, quicker to pick up, you know, the new generations are going to be growing up with AI, right? And so these places are going to be hotbeds, I think, of that collaboration, and then also places, I think, to practice like flex skills or social skills or practical skills. So I see it as like, yeah, maybe AI. It's not about knowledge, right, or knowing the right answer, but it would be what to do with those answers.
I'm very encouraged by universities and schools in general moving to a competency-based model rather than just how many hours of a semester that you actually passed. Can you actually do the things? Can you actually think a certain way if it's critical thinking and liberal arts that you're doing things? So having competency-based degrees rather than things that are based on semester hours, which is a way to actually prop up the tenureships of professors. It's an antiquated model. of how we actually confer degrees. So if you can actually prove that you're competent in getting a degree in marketing and you can do it in a year and a half, all the power to you. If it takes you 5 years, then it's going to take you 5 years, but it's not based on credits. It's actually based on competence and skills, and being able to not just do tasks, but to also think.
Nick, question, comment?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by Charlene's talking about writing a book on wisdom. And coming back to Gary mentioned experience. I think the well-known saying is that good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. And what I'm getting at is the challenge that almost every professional is starting to face because of the power of automation technology and so forth, where the juniors who used to come along a path where they learned, where they made mistakes, had them corrected by the more experienced people in that profession, and eventually they make their own mistakes, they learn them, and eventually they become senior professionals able to train juniors. But you don't have, we're missing that path. It seems to be disappearing. And how do you get around that?
Thoughts? Charlene?
Yeah, Charlene, you want to take that one first?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
All I was going to say is, so Charlene is right in I totally agree with what the way that you framed it is. I mean, a lot of work sucks. I mean, a lot of the way we even think about constructing jobs and roles and the way organizations try to bring people into them. And there's just a lot of things that are sort of still anchored in the industrial era. If we instead conceive of that both our educational institutions and our organizations have to be platforms on which people can solve problems, on which they can develop practical experience with solving real world problems, then what ends up happening is we unbundle the organization. So for instance, there's far more mentorships, apprenticeships, there's project work, there's all sorts of ways that the organization is making it very easy, especially for young workers, but not only for young workers, for workers transitioning from other fields, can get experience, can be able to collaborate with others, can be able to be trained, and all in much more rapid time, because we know that the AI tools will allow us to do a lot of these things much more effectively. If we stay anchored in the old rules of work and we use this risk reduction mechanism we call hiring to be able to find the perfect candidate, and if all of these things that we continue to, these processes we continue to follow, that essentially squeeze out diversity, squeeze out young people, squeeze out a lot of the alternative mindsets and experiences that people could be great contributors could have, but the system is so optimized for these older rules of work, then what ends up happening is those people won't get that opportunity, and young people will not get the chance to be able to focus on real world problems. And so that's a sea change. Like that's a tremendous opportunity that I think the tools can be tremendously helpful with, but we have to change the way, the mechanics with which we approach constructing work roles and hiring people into them.
I love Eugene's comment. The knowledge that is being generated from the industry is now faster than the universities. Apprenticeship is something that they're advocating. And I think that's a good segue to, we're going to skip 3, we're going to go to 4, strategic transformations, navigating continuous disruption, and the role of the organization that has to adapt to really, I think, continuous change, continuous education. It expands work from, in the old rules of work, you have one job, you do one thing, and we don't really want you to participate in anything else, just do the one thing. Very kind of uniform, mono kind of orientation, no room for growth. And that's why you have that attitude about the organization, like I'm going to put my 8 hours and I'm gone. I'm going to have hobbies, and I've got another world and another life. But suddenly I think there has to be a kind of like a merge, because the workplace, we spend so much time there. So Charlene, you've been transitioning now to a new book threats, bets, and no regrets, how to create a winning Gen AI strategy as you focus on this problem of a legacy company becoming an AI powered company. And what does that look like? And some of the foundational resistances to change. And what are your thoughts on this kind of shift to, in a sense, redefining the next rules of work and the organization?
Right. This is what I was alluding to when I was talking about the disruption mindset. Many of the ideas that were foundational in there are being translated into this book also as well. And I love what Tom just wrote here. I say, lose the idea of failure. And one of the things I've been working with is, what's your relationship with failure? How do you think about it? How do you work around it, work with it? We talk about fail fast, fail smart, celebrating failure. Failure is an option. And one of the most poignant conversations I had was with one organization that said, we tried it all. We tried everything to get our arms wrapped around failure. And it just is terrible. It just sucks to fail. So we decided to just never fail anymore. And he's just like, how do you do that? And there was this mindset, to Gary's point. You change your mindset to say, why are we feeling bad about something that didn't work out? We didn't expect it to work out. We knew when we started this journey that there were going to be two options. We're going to achieve what we wanted to, or we're going to fall short. So why are we disappointed by that? We fell short, but now we have a data point. Now we know how we can close a gap. And so when you remove that emotional baggage of what it means to fail, and you remove the shame and the regret of that, you start looking at decisions and say, why do we act as if 99% of the decisions are things that we are, that these are decisions that we have to make and can never go back on, when it's just the opposite, that 99% of the decisions we can change our minds on. And we don't, because we'll look bad, we'll look weak, we'll look like we're incompetent. But the reality is, if we could let go of that, work would look very, very different. The way we make decisions would be very different. I think about wisdom as not being wise all the time. What wisdom is the ability to make good decisions. And you tend to be wiser when you make better decisions. And so if we can just be 10% wiser and make 10% better decisions more consistently, what you're doing is you're looking at the times when you don't make good decisions and you're learning from them. That's what wisdom gives you. It's not failure. And to the point that someone made before, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And so you don't get experience unless you fail. So when you have a healthy relationship with failure, then you can deal with all of these change and all this uncertainty. And the reason the book is called Threats, Bets, and No Regrets is you have to think about the threats and challenges of AI. You can think about the opportunities, but you also have to be really, really comfortable with the fact that it is constantly changing. Many things are uncertain. You're literally writing your strategy down in pencil, erasing it and starting over again in some places, and you're not going to have any regrets. And that's a very, very different mindset than what we currently have in most businesses today.
That's beautiful. Gary, thoughts?
I couldn't possibly add to that. That was perfect as far as I'm concerned. So what she said.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the wisdom piece is already built into the next book. It's like, again, it's sort of like beyond the opposites. You've got this wisdom piece that says, of course, failure, if you just go black and white, it's this or that. That's like the old world of work, in a sense, right? The new world is, embrace the mistake is part of the learning. It's part of the process. And suddenly, it's all in play. It's all good. Any other thoughts or comments? And then we can kind of come to a kind of wrap up around predictions and priorities.
Can I just give one other observation? I wrote a piece earlier this year about, can AI be wise? And one of the things I was just realizing is that if you think about hallucinations, we think hallucinations are just AI just being broken. It doesn't work. Actually, I think it's, again, being very real in that it's going to try its best to fulfill the response, even if it's making things up. But it has to learn over time that making things up is not a good thing. And it's, again, demonstrably getting better and better every day by having fewer hallucinations. But we need to give that sense of grace to our AI engines as we do to each other when it comes to failure. And how do you fail gracefully as an AI, but also as an AI first organization, failing gracefully, and giving grace to those points of failure is a really important part of our cultures going forward.
I mean, another piece is going to be the fact that personal AI is also going to be a guidance system that you're going to have close in that can remind you that you have to go to wisdom here, that you're kind of like becoming too one-sided. Open up to that was okay. This was a necessary threshold to learn that that doesn't work. Let's move on. And also in a previous session that we had about a month ago now on hallucinations, we came to the conclusion that hallucinations was on a continuum. There are times when you want it to hallucinate, to really be super creative with image kind of recombination. On the other side, when we go towards medicine, we want it not to hallucinate, so we dial it down. And I think that's where wisdom is too, is to see things on a continuum, on a spectrum, rather than this or that. Over to you, Evian. Thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, Gary, thanks for your masterclass at dinner last week about how the kind of the flex skills are now beginning to usurp, in a way, the hard skills. And so I just want to comment in that regard, that as a brain person, I have been a brain scientist, essentially. I've been shocked at the extent to which AI is a wisdom facilitator. And I just want to share a brain lens in that regard. One of the things we see in the brain is that there's a tremendous disconnect, as we all know, but we sort of see it explicitly, between our emotion and intuition and our rational thinking. And of course, we live in a culture that is hugely biased towards the wonders of, rational override. Whereas what we see in practice is that the most effective people are people who have harmonized their emotion, intuition, and rational thinking in all decision-making and in everything that they do. So what has surprised me about AI is we essentially have these two brains living within us, the non-conscious, no words, patterns, and meaning, and driving these rational words, numbers, and skills, poorly reconciled. And what AI does seamlessly in empowering is combine these amazing patterns, images, new possibilities, with words, numbers, and skills in a remarkably seamless way. I mean, it was so interesting, Michael, to hear you start off by simply saying that, the simplest combination that you now can use, and did in that poster, is ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Canva. So I just think there's an incredible empowerment process that's now at our disposal to reconcile some fundamental fractures about the way human brains operate. That's it. That's all I got.
I love that comment. Okay, let's segue over to Caitlin. That'd probably be you were at dinner too, that so you understand the context.
Well, and it's actually a perfect time to follow Evian, because I was thinking about the shadow and about the need to also embody and embrace our shadows and our shadow side. And I'm curious about what Charlene and Gary think about the word grace. When Charlene said it, I was thinking, oh, grace. And I'm especially conscious right now not to anthropomorphize the AI, to use it as a wisdom tool. And also, for context, when I was living in Switzerland for a number of years, I co-founded a group called the Center of Wise Leadership. And we had this model that was like a spiral where people could come in and out of their banking jobs, or, whatever their workplace held, they could come to the Center of Wise Leadership and think about wisdom. And the number one thing people asked for is skills in listening, how to become better listeners, to their teams, to each other. So I was curious also, if you wanted to comment on anything that has to do with listening and how AI and this next level of work can make us potentially better listeners.
Yeah, Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, was the person who coined the phrase, we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in those proportions. And so listening is the core skill for wisdom. The ability to learn, to see, to look at things with equanimity, without judgment, and to be able to see the reality, is such an important skill. And then the grace that goes with it to put understanding behind it, again, to remove that judgment from yourself, is the second part of it, to then be able to make a decision. And it's about being able to put that rational part and emotional part and put them in the same space and hold these two contradictions. Again, wisdom is about seeing things as continuums rather than black and white, to be able to live in that gray. And so when it comes to all of these tools and so many of the things that we talk about in work, we have so many absolutes. Like, work is this way, or it has to be this way, or, you know, these people, generations think this way, rather than seeing that there's a lot of nuance in all of this. If we were to play in the nuance, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting in terms of the discussions we could have, but it would be a lot more realistic, and it would feel a lot better too, I think, when you can revel in the fact that there's a lot of nuance out there. I really want to learn more about the Center for Wise Leadership, by the way. So let's follow up afterwards. I would love to learn more about it, Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you. And that helps too, because I was thinking the AI tools, even by attending to our questions, I'm imagining a lot of people feel like they are listened to in a certain way too, that it's conversational.
Right. I think that's the reason why the chats are so compelling, because you are literally having a conversation with somebody who's very good at having these conversations. And if you ask it to listen really well and to question and to challenge you, it will do that. It doesn't get tired. It can push you in directions that you may not feel comfortable with if you ask it to, but you need to ask it to do it. And so, and again, we're going to talk about agents, I think, in just a second. I think us being able to program things, I've been playing a lot with the custom GPTs. Again, I have it programmed so that it will challenge me, because that's what I want it to do. I want it to challenge me as me. And so it's built into my private GPT to do things like that. So we will tune these things to be as functional and in service of what we need in particular situations.
Well, I think Caitlin would agree that we're passing through a sort of Phygital, sort of transformational moment here collectively with AI. And so why don't we segue to our last section, predictions and priorities for 2024, the next phase of AI, and the trends and the focus areas that we might anticipate. And so in a conversation with you, Charlene, a few hours ago, we talked about autonomous agents is on your radar. Maybe you could talk a little bit about where you see that. That sounds very big, and it's way under the hood. And it's, you know, the next level of like a bunch of actions that are being done on your behalf. Tell us more about what you see coming.
Sure. Right now, if you want AI to do anything, you really have to be at the keyboard and give it step-by-step instructions. There are things like plugins now that can go and get data from outside in real time to inform the decisions. But it's still pretty basic, and it breaks a lot. The problem, it has a really hard time holding state, so to speak, across a multitude of tasks. But these tools are getting much, much better. Again, this sort of first came out in about April of this year, and the tool sets to be able to create them are just getting better and better. Bill Gates talked about the rise of personal agents, the ability to go, basically understand. I think Roy was talking about in some of the chats. My biggest issue is I can't wait for these things to come along, having a co-pilot just there kind of I can just go and ask. It's like a Jarvis on demand. But the issue is we have to give it so much of our information. We literally need to have it listen into many parts of our lives that we may or may not be comfortable with it doing that right now. And that is going to require a whole level of trust with these AI tools that I don't think we have necessarily yet. So even though we can, I think it's going to take a lot longer for these agents, these personal and intelligent agents, to really come in to our personal lives. I think the places where they're going to come is in the routinizations of some of the most basic tasks at work. Think about a sales agent that can be your personal sales assistant, taking notes, entering them into your CRM, all those tedious things that you just don't want to do, and then generate the contact list, pre-write the emails, do all that stuff for you without you having to lift the finger. And so it can just watch how you work and just start taking care of things for you. So in environments like that, the agents that are very specific to a particular task, I think are going to be the first ones that come out. My general personal AI agent is going to be a couple years out still because of this fundamental thing. What data are we comfortable giving it? You may have seen this new pen that came out from some of the designers from Apple called Humane. And this pen doesn't necessarily light up or tell you if it's recording. Do you notify the people around you that you're recording the conversations? Do you even give people the opportunity to take emails that you sent them in a personal nature and feed them into an AI? To what extent do you want that to be discoverable to the AI? And so there's a lot of questions around how much information we are comfortable sharing with these tools. I, for one, feel very comfortable sharing it, but do I trust the various agencies and large platforms with that data, like all of my data, all of it, to be able to create that AI for me? That's a high level of trust.
Yeah, that's an interesting threshold that needs to be overcome and highly inspected and kind of navigated very carefully. So hurry up and slow down actually makes sense as we move into this next phase of AI. What are your thoughts, Gary? What do you see coming? We here at the Next Collective, we also do movies beyond books and authors, and we did the movie Her. And if you notice in the movie Her, which I think is probably one of the top 3 movies, that are super related to this moment, there are no keyboards, right? Everything is voice activated. And everyone has got in when they're walking through the streets, they have their earbuds in and they're talking to their AIs. So with personal AI, the way it is, I've adapted to it very quickly. I see this as another piece that's coming in 2024. What do you see, Gary?
So just to add a couple of things to what Charlene was saying. So there's the artificial intelligence tools we see, and then there's what's under the covers, and is going to increasingly become part of infrastructure. And I think this is again the sort of natural waves where we're going to see a lot more embedded in a lot of the things that we use on a daily basis. And then the question is, how much are we in control of that? How much is it our data versus data that others are leveraging to their value and purpose rather than up to ours? I'll tell you a couple of things that I think are just pretty likely coming. So there'll be more of this sort of AI as infrastructure. We're just going to see software that has behaved certain ways in the past that you're going to now it's going to be fueled by these tools, and hopefully that'll make them far more effective and more customized to you. There's going to be a lot of use cases for these tools where you're going to take the basic functions of the tools, and then there's going to be so many different flavors. You're going to have a career coach, you're going to have your personal life coach, you're going to have a work coach. You're going to, there's going to be a lot of different ways that those tools can be leveraged in your life, and eventually those will consolidate. But we're going to continue the Cambrian explosion, I think, as we see more use cases for leveraging the tools, especially for our own advantage. I think we're still in very, very early days of adoption, large scale adoption in a lot of enterprises. And that's just as Charlene was saying at the beginning, that process of helping them to be able to navigate that. That's going to be, I think, a big deliverable for 2024. We're going to see more and more around skills infrastructure. So when we think of the combination between what we do and what our technologies do, there's such an opportunity to be able to learn skills much more rapidly, to be able to make it a team sport in developing new skills with others. And I think that curve will only accelerate because, again, we're going to realize that there's a lot of ways we can apply these tools and help us to develop superpowers, better understanding of ourselves, better application of using the tools to be able to solve new problems. what I want to counterbalance it with is just sort of one, I know I've lost this battle a long time ago, but if we think of humans and our technology, as I see them this way, and when we anthropomorphize our technology, or we call them cobots, or we call them part of our team or part of our, I'm concerned that we start to elevate the technologies, and I believe that we collaborate with each other as humans, and I believe that our technologies are assistive and not humans, and we can have the AGI and the technology as entities sort of discussion another time. But I do want to caution, and I know I've lost this battle, but I do want to caution, the more we keep the mindset that this is all about the benefit to humans, and that the software is there to be able to help us, the better I think we can continue the framing that keeps this anchored in a human-centric world.
I love that thought. Charlene, on anthropomorphizing AI, where do you stand on it?
It's not alive. It's not sentient. And we can be fooled and lulled into a sense that we can trust it, that it understands meaning, it has empathy, and it doesn't have any of those things. And so you have to keep remembering that, and take what it does with a huge grain of salt, because it is wonderful and beautiful, and I appreciate it deeply, especially when in a moment of need, I need that empathy. But then I have to remember it's not sentient. And so we can be, and it becomes really dangerous, because if we don't keep that in mind, we ascribe it powers that it doesn't have. And we then will potentially change our relationship with it in ways that may not necessarily be healthy. So I think this AI literacy is not just about what it does and how to use AI, but also how does it change our relationship to technology and to each other? Again, the movie Her is a great example, where you actually develop love and intimacy because it sees so much of you. This AI actually knows so much about me. Do I sacrifice my real human relationships that are not as good as seeing me and understanding me as my AI? So I think it becomes a really interesting question as it gets better and better at being human-like about what our relationship to this AI will be.
Well, on that note, I'd like to bring this to a close. That was a beautiful conversation, and thanks for everyone participating in it. The idea of, I think, Gary, keeping a grounding and that a separation is part of, I think, our job here. One thing that we never discussed was the existential threat of AI, that we could do that on another episode. But I think what this does is talks about the idea of steering it consciously by making sure that there is that separation, and that, it's humanity is the project, right? Not AI. And so how do we kind of like consciously shape the future for humanity? I think that's the meta project that we're all involved in, and this conversation adds a lot of kind of layers of understanding to where we're going from 2023, like the most remarkable year, and we're moving into 2024 as a segue. Thank you so much for both of your thoughts and your wisdom. So let me put you back into the grid and close the session. There we go. And also, if anyone is interested in joining this kind of conversation, this discourse, in the chat, there's a link to a way of joining or applying for our community. So please do love to jump on a call with you, get to know you, and see if there's a fit and that you'd like to be part of this discourse. Thank you again to our speakers, and have a wonderful night. And next week, by the way, we're closing the year with 2001: A Space Odyssey. And if you haven't seen it in like 20 years, take another look. I think you're going to be blown away. Pre-CGI, one of the masters, Kubrick, next level. That movie still, to this day, is like, put a pin in it. Very important to re-look at that again, and we're going to do that next week. So if you're interested in joining us for that, please check out the link and jump on the next collective. All the best, everyone, and good night.